Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly fascinating piece of source material called Ordinary People, Extraordinary Purpose, the 2026 Calling. We're going to explore a narrative that takes us all the way from ancient shores right into our modern, hyper-connected lives in 2026. Now, the text presents this incredible paradox. What if the exact reasons you feel completely unqualified to do something meaningful are the absolute precise reasons you are perfectly suited for it? Pretty wild, right? So let's unpack the history, the psychology, and the profound paradigm shift this text is offering us.
All right, let's dive right into this core question the source poses from the jump. We live in a world that pushes this modern myth, this idea that absolute perfection is a strict prerequisite for doing meaningful work or finding a higher purpose. We tend to look at our own weaknesses, our past mistakes, our insecurities, and we instantly label them as disqualifications, like, nope, can't do it. But the text totally flips this on its head. It asks us to actually consider that these perceived flaws might literally be the key to our calling.
Section 1. The Unexpected Chosen. So the text highlights this massive subversion of expectations. Back when Jesus began his ministry, the world was totally expecting a revolution led by, powerful military warriors, famous teachers, or the religious elite. But that is not what happened. He literally walked right past the scholars and politicians of the day. Instead, he strolled beside the Sea of Galilee and chose fishermen. We're talking ordinary, uneducated guys who were at the very bottom of the social ladder, just trying to survive. It's a stark reality, and it sets the entire foundation for everything else we're going to cover today. Section 2. Status versus availability. Let's think about the world standard for a second. Especially in our 2026 comparison culture that's just fueled by social media. It constantly demands a flawless resume, massive follower counts, total perfection, and money, right? But the source material contrasts this so sharply. According to the text, God's standard focuses on the heart, the future, the calling, and above all else, availability. The text explicitly points out that just being available is way more important than any kind of worldly status. It's a real game changer.
Section 3, Redeeming a Messy Past, Peter.
To really ground this theory, the text gives us two powerful historical case studies. The first is a guy named Peter, and his story directly addresses the fear of public failure. And look, the source does not sugarcoat Peter's history at all. His baggage was significant. He was impulsive, super emotional, and honestly pretty reckless sometimes. He famously sank in the water because of his own doubt, and in his absolute darkest moment, he publicly denied even knowing Jesus 3 separate times. The narrative asks us to just imagine the deep shame, the guilt, the regret Peter must have felt. It's an incredibly relatable picture of a massive, extremely public failure. And this brings us to what might be the core message of the text. Because after the resurrection, Jesus didn't define Peter by that absolute worst moment. He didn't come at him with anger or tell him he was rejected. Instead, he restored him with love, simply telling him, "Feed my sheep." The narrative uses this moment to really emphasize that purpose is built through grace, not perfection. According to the source, your failure is definitely not the end of your story. Section 4. Redeeming a Messy Past, Matthew. Now, our second historical case study focuses on a man named Matthew, and this one proves that your societal reputation does not dictate your destiny. The cultural context here is super important. Matthew was a tax collector, and in that era, tax collectors weren't just mildly disliked, they were absolutely hated. They were viewed as corrupt traitors who literally stole from their own people. The narrative paints this vivid picture of Matthew as a completely rejected outcast, dealing with whispers of thief and sinner everywhere he went. Yet the text notes that Jesus walked directly past all that intense societal rejection, right up to Matthew's tax table, and just said, "Follow me." He saw right past the messy reputation and saw a destiny instead. And this is incredible because, as the source points out, this exact same despised outcast would go on to write one of the 4 Gospels. He became a voice that would eventually inspire billions of people. Talk about a comeback, right? So the narrative uses these historical accounts to draw a direct line to this universal principle. Transformed people become living testimonies. The text argues that a messy past, whether it's addictions, mistakes, massive failures, or deep regrets, doesn't scare God at all. In fact, it suggests that the people who end up being used the most powerfully are very often the ones who intimately know exactly what brokenness feels like. Why? Because they specialize in redemption.
Section 5, Your 2026 Calling.
Okay, so we've got all this ancient history, but how does the source actually apply this to us today? Well, the text addresses the modern reader directly, and it lists out these very common excuses we use to delay our purpose. Things like, I'm too shy, I'm not talented enough, I don't know enough, or I've just made too many mistakes. The author's point here is that we so often wait until we have our whole lives perfectly together before answering a call. But just as Jesus knew the disciples' flaws before calling them, the text reminds us that our own flaws are absolutely not a surprise, and they certainly aren't a disqualification.
And the really crucial point here is that this calling isn't limited to some narrow, specific box. The source material outlines that your assignment in 2026 could literally be anything. It could be ministry, jumping into a new business, making music, helping the poor, or hey, even finally starting that YouTube channel you've been so afraid to launch. The text emphasizes that ordinary people are called into these extraordinary missions, not to get famous or gain personal glory, but to clearly demonstrate a higher power working right through them.
Section 6. Faith requires action.
Now, understanding you have a calling is one thing, right? But the absolute difference between just having a cool dream and actually living in your purpose is action. The source breaks faith down into 3 really distinct steps. Step 1, faith moves. Step 2, faith obeys. And step 3, faith steps forward into uncertainty. Think about it. The historical disciples didn't just feel super inspired and sit there. They physically got up and left their boats behind. The text challenges us in 2026 to stop letting fear keep us stuck and to start moving forward, not because we feel 100% ready, but because we're willing to just trust the process.
So to summarize the core takeaway from our source material today, ordinary people become extraordinary simply by being willing. The text is incredibly adamant about this. Your past does not cancel your purpose. Your weakness does not cancel your calling, and your fear does not cancel your destiny. It's a profound, beautiful leveling of the playing field for absolutely anyone who feels perfectly ordinary. We're going to wrap up this explainer with a really powerful final thought directly from the text. God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. Based on everything we've unpacked today, I want to leave you with this. If your deepest insecurities are actually your greatest qualifications, what extraordinary purpose are you perfectly suited for right now? Thanks so much for joining me for today's explainer, and as always,